Welcome back. This is UPfront. My guest, as I did say earlier on, is a former Auditor General of the Republic of Ghana who was unceremoniously asked to proceed on leave somewhere in 2020. The debacle, I'm sure you might very well be aware of. He wrote a response suggesting that the decision to ask him to proceed on leave was wrong. When he did so, his leave was extended by the Presidency of the Republic of Ghana, acting for and on behalf of Ghanaians anyway. And a man who for the first time in our history had implemented surcharges, who for the first time in our history had raked in over 4 billion of money happens to be monies we lose all the time in Auditor General's reports. And for the avoidance of doubt, since he left office, no single surcharge had happened, as we are told consistently. Mr. Daniel Domelevo, you're welcome to UPfront.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful for taking me on to talk on these issues.
Let me start with how you felt when you heard you had been vindicated. I mean, those of us who are consistently being in contact, you were very optimistic the decision was poor and wrong. But when you heard that the highest court of the land had backed your decision or had argued that it was wrong to ask you to proceed on leave, were you jumping around, super excited, or you just took it in your stride?
Yeah, I was not jumping around, but I felt vindicated when the decision came. If you remember, when I wrote to the office of the president to draw their attention to the unconstitutionality or the unlawfulness of the directive from the president, I was told it's because I'm not a lawyer, I don't appreciate the law. And I'm happy that those in whose mouths, in whose bosom, recite the interpretation of the Constitution and the laws of the country have affirmed my position. So that makes me happy. But that is not my major cause of happiness. What makes me more happy is that from now onward, there are going to be several Auditors General to come. There are going to be several presidents to come. There will not be a repeat of what happened in 2022, any Auditor General, or I believe even independent constitution office holders. That is my happiness.
Let me, and feel free to point it out if I get any of the sequence of events leading to that decision to ask you to proceed on leave wrong. So you were doing your job in the office. You had occupied a couple of years. And in the throes of doing that particular job, there was a very popular engagement on Crows and Associates, which involved, one way or the other, the office of the senior minister, Yao Safumafo, along the line. People were not excited in the Republic. It ended up in court at different levels. Then subsequently, there were engagements. To some extent, even your nationality was called into question. Indeed, your date of birth and other issues were also brought to the fore in this conversation. The presidency had cause to even extend your leave of office when you reacted to that decision that says you should be going on leave. Did I get any of the sequence that led to that final decision to say you should proceed on leave wrong?
I think the sequence is wrong. And what was very disturbing is the fact that we were not only at the Supreme Court with the senior minister or Crow and Associates, but then I had been directed by the Supreme Court to go and look at the evidence of work done by Crow and Associates. And I was given 10 days. 5 days into that, the president said, go away. And then he appoints someone who within 24 hours confirmed that work done was satisfactory. I don't know what methodology he used. I don't want to fault him for that. But it did not sit well with me because, it was not my property. It is Ghana's property. But if you handled my property like that, I will not be happy. The long and short of it is that, today we are at a point where we know who is wrong and who is not wrong. But let me tell you about one thing which saddens me about this decision, is the fact that This is the highest office of the land, the office of the president, which is at the forefront of violating the constitution, of violating laws of the country. I would like to plead with the office to desist from this so that we see the office of the president as the one which is at the forefront of enforcing or upholding the laws of the country. It should not be said that in a day the Supreme Court has decided on 2 cases that in all these cases the presidency was wrong. I don't think it augurs well. So it is my wish and my prayer that going forward, care will be taken to ensure that we don't run into such developments or that same situations in the future.
Now, the President of the Republic, and all presidents for that matter, takes some oath of office. The presidential oath, in part, actually reads that he will be faithful and true to the Republic of Ghana, that he will at all times preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana, and that he dedicates himself to the service and well-being of the people of this republic and to do right to all manner of persons. Do you think he did right by you?
In my considered opinion, he didn't. But fortunately, this has come to the notice of the Supreme Court. So their pronouncement on it, I think, is the final one. So it's okay.
Okay. Now, there are those who have been bandying this expression about justice delayed is justice denied. Is that the same way you feel too?
No, I don't feel that way because I don't think anyone knows about justice delayed being justice denied more than the Supreme Court. It is the apex court of the country. So they should know this better. So they may have reasons why it has taken them this long. So I would not like to say that I've been denied justice. But to be very honest with you, it's better late than never, and it is going to guide us going forward. We have a lot ahead of us. Several auditors general are going to be appointed in the future. So this is there to guide us. So people should not be too worried about the fact that it did not come quickly enough for me to continue doing the work. But you remember, you and I had a discussion, I think somewhere last year, where I said that I had no problem with the timing of leaving office because the environment was very toxic, if you remember that.
Yes, you said so.
The environment was so, yes, it was so toxic that I think leaving that environment was good for myself because you don't operate in such an enemy territory and you operate well.
What does that really mean? You were in charge of the audit service. In fact, at some point you reformed that audit service. I remember there were so many recruitments of auditors of different backgrounds. Sometimes you were even specifically looking for people who had the competence to do specific jobs. How can such an environment that you have curated into something that became enviable, become so toxic?
If you recall some of the earlier developments, as far back as 2018, I petitioned the president about the behavior of the board. They were interfering with my job. And persistently, that went on, especially the board chairman. And if you remember, at the High Court, as well as the Supreme Court, it was the board chairman who was representing Honorable Asafo Mafu. Anytime Honorable Asafo Mafu was not in court, he was represented by a board chairman. Can you imagine such an arrangement, a governance arrangement, where your board chairman is the one who is sitting opposing you? He was there at the High Court. He was at the Supreme Court. I remember at the Supreme Court on one or two of the occasions, the Honorable Asafo Mafu was not there, and he stood up as representing Honorable Asafo Mafu. And even if you read the decision of the Supreme Court, you will see that his name is there, that he represented Honorable Asafo Mafu. Such an environment cannot be conducive for any normal person to operate. So that is why I call it an enemy territory, because I know that the enemies around were plenty. But I don't want to go into too much details than what I've said. But what I'm trying to say is that the environment was not conducive even to continue operating independently and effectively. So it is okay. It is not about me. It is an office. It is a position, not a possession. So they say move, and I have moved. We thank God a decision has come, and that may not be visited on the current Auditor General or the subsequent ones, and I'm happy with that. Thank you.
I know, for example, that you were doing some work on specifically COVID funds, if it was quite clear. You're also doing some work on the amount of monies we are spent or we're spending in fighting flooding and also improving that particular situation. At the time that you were asked to proceed on leave, do you think you had done enough, mindful of what you had told me was the mandate you were given in that particular office? Have you achieved that particular mandate?
No, at the time where I was leaving office, I had done what I thought I could do, but so much work was in progress, including, I remember I was also doing procurement audit. And I thank God that report never saw the light of the day, so it's good, because it was very explosive. And I thought that report should have been completed and issued, but well, I don't dictate to the current Auditor General. He doesn't find it necessary, so it has not been issued. But let me say, it is a position. I occupy it, hand over the baton to someone else, he also continue. If he decides to continue the race or go the reverse gear, it is not it doesn't lie in my mouth to dictate to him or to her on what to do. So the long and short of it, from my point of view, is that the position that I took or stood for, which is the same position with the CSOs, who I thank very much for standing with me and sending this case to the Supreme Court, has been upheld by the Supreme Court, and I think to God be the glory.
You had a popular expression consistently when you were in office, and you often quoted that to me: when you fight corruption, corruption will fight you. I mean, do you think that,
exactly,
in hindsight, do you think you were fought heavily by corruption?
Very, very heavily. Corruption was fighting me heavily. I could see corruption fighting me everywhere. Do you remember the type of audits that were commissioned and investigations commissioned? Do you remember that even Yoko was asked to interrogate procurement process that I was not part of? And even that case, the High Court ruled to say that the behavior of Yoko was unlawful, it was arbitrary, they used very unpleasant words about Yoko. It is all attempt to get me into trouble. After that, the board chairman went and engaged his friend to come and audit me, a private audit firm. I don't know what procurement method he used to come and audit me, and which was also a violation of the Constitution, because the Constitution clearly said it's Parliament which will appoint auditors to audit the audit service. But then the board chairman went ahead and did all these things. So I saw corruption fighting me left and right. And the champion that they were using was the board chairman, Professor Duajimai. He was the one who holding the PS and the guns and the bullets and shooting left, right, left and center. Thank God he has not been successful.
Now, there's a related question, though, about regrets. That question is, you are in a very, some say, very lucrative job before you took up this Auditor General role. In hindsight, was it worth the time you spent in the Republic of Ghana in this particular role, mindful of all that has happened?
Yes, it was worth it. In fact, to be honest with you, the job that I was doing before becoming Auditor General, I was working with several Auditors General and financial institutions across the world, the globe. And most of the time, the work took me to the office of the Auditors General, and I normally will open their law and show them the role that they are supposed to play in fighting corruption. So when the opportunity came for me to be of service to my country, I thought it was good to do it. I have no regret whatsoever becoming the Auditor General, even though the conditions and the terms of that office cannot match what it was for my previous job. I still thank God for the opportunity that I was able to serve in the office of the Auditor General.
Now, these things happen to people and family reacts differently. For your family, mindful of what had happened throughout the period, they questioned your identity, they questioned your age, they questioned your judgment. How did it impact family? Well, I am told that Daniel Zhao Domelevo, there is a technical difficulty making our conversation a bit short-lived. We should be able to fix that line, bring him back, because there are other interesting elements that ought to be explored. So, wonderful. We sure have him back here. And Mr. Domelevo, you're welcome back. I was asking a question about all of the things that surrounded your exit from office, how that impacted family, and how they are taking the news of your vindication.
Well, I'm sure all of them have heard the news. How they are taking it, I don't know. As we speak, I'm not in the country.
Certainly.
Even if I'm in the country, I will not have seen them. So I don't know how they are taking it.
The story is told of how your son was not happy, you coming to take up this job because of the differences in the perks that he was likely to enjoy. Is this something you were able to resolve along the line?
To be honest with you, some people even sacrificed to do more dangerous work for free or almost for free. Whenever the risk of the office and poor remuneration comes up, I usually cite the police and the military. And say, look at people who are ready to face the bullet. They are ready to die for the country. And their salaries, I don't know if you have an idea. I'm not the one to tell you, but they are nothing to write home about. So I tell people that if we don't fight for our country, if we don't sacrifice for our country, then we have no reason to complain. So I always advise and get people who are worried, especially family, to say that, look, somebody must sacrifice for the country. So that is okay. I don't think it's a problem now. Unfortunately, now I'm a pensioner, so they are very happy.
Now, there's a question, though. Professor Azim put up a post about the case requiring the speed with which the recent matter that dealt with the Supreme Court contempt of Professor White, as in it should have been speedily dealt with so that we will get the outcome early enough. Do you think that would have been very wonderful, that in the year that the issue went to court, they could have resolved it?
Well, several have said that, and I responded to it earlier on by saying that I don't know what held the Supreme Court on for all this while. And I also believe that justice delayed is justice denied is known to the Supreme Court judges more than any other person. So what kept the case up to this time, I am unable to say anything about it. But better late than never. I agree with people who said it should have happened early enough so that we continue our work. But I'm saying that we have a lot of future. There's going to be more auditors general from now going. There's going to be new presidents from now going, so that this can guide them. So I will plead with people to forget about what is gone and we think about the forward and the future. And so I think from my point of view, I would not like to fault them. They know what they are doing. I've never been a Supreme Court judge before. When I was Auditor General and you wanted to change my modus operandi, I will resist and fight it. Because I will tell you that I'm independent and you will not influence how I do my work. I would not like to do the same thing to the Supreme Court. So I respect their position. Late as people may think it is, I think it's better late than never. And we can benefit from this decision going forward.
Now, the president had cause to say along the line that you, as Auditor General, and your successor had done a lot of work that superseded the kind of work that you did in office. And, of course, his description of yourself was the beloved Domelevo had done in office. But there are some issues that just cannot go away. Issues about surcharging, issues about the disallowance, that space that became a seminal point in your role as Auditor General. Are you worried that it appears that's no longer happening now?
Well, I'm not worried about the president's statement because the basis of his assessment is what I don't know it. So I'm not worried about that. But I think if you remember Occupy Ghana versus Attorney General, the Supreme Court gave a ruling against the Auditor General and gave consequential orders. And the consequential orders require that anytime you came across unlawful expenditure, disallow and surcharge. Some people are of the view. I remember I heard one of your colleague journalists who said 11 cases were sent to court and I lost the 11 cases. And I said, look at this idiot. Do you know how many surcharges you have issued? You talked about the disallowance, which amounted to 5.4 billion. There were so many institutions together with other disallowances and surcharges that we issued. And if only 11 went to court and we lost it, and I don't believe that we lost it because there was no merit in what we did, and that is the reason why he was taunting himself, saying that he thinks Domelevo was in a rush, he was in blah, blah, blah. I don't think we should think that way. My job is to disallow any item of expenditure which I think was contrary to law and surcharge. If you think it was in accordance with law, the Constitution is very clear. You appeal against me. If you appeal against me and it is upheld, that is it. We move on. And again, I would like to say that this is a novelty. It's not something which we have done in the past. So we are likely to err. But I don't even believe that in those cases we were erring. There were a lot of arms twisted. There were a lot of things which had been done, including my leaving office. If I were in office, I don't believe we would have lost those cases. But that is it. And I don't fault anyone. I would like to say that we thank God the ruling is here, and we just go with that. Thank you.
Now, there's a related question, though, to I was asking, are you worried that when you left office, this is no longer happening? Because it became the order of the day. There was a judgment back in that particular movement. You were so in full swing. But now, upon several insistence, we are still not hearing from the current occupants of that office when it comes to surcharges and disallowance. Is that problematic? Well, I understand we still have a difficulty with that connection to Mr. Daniel Domelevo. Because he's a man that I struggle to get most of the time, I need to make sure that he answers all the questions today. And the crux of the engagement is that earlier today, the Supreme Court of the Republic of Ghana said what the order from the presidency that he should proceed on leave as Auditor General was unconstitutional. And they took down that particular directive, which was given somewhere in 2020. And if you recall the events that happened after that, after he was directed to proceed on leave, Mr. Domelevo wrote a response to the presidency. That response got his leave extended by some months actually. The indication then was that he had done a poor calculation and appreciation of the law, and that his view was not what the presidency took. Civil society grouping, unhappy with the development and very happy with the work of Mr. Domelevo, decided to go to court. And today, the court finally delivered a judgment that says the presidency was wrong and Domelevo was right. The civil society groups that contested this matter, they were also right. I am getting to appreciate the background to what has happened to the man. For the years he stayed in office as Auditor General, for the work he has done in that particular role, and going forward, what we can do with such actions. That's the kind of conversation I'm having with him on UPfront tonight. The understanding, though, is also to get some other people within the corruption fighting space to join the conversation, to give me the appreciation of where this judgment sits when it comes to advancing the space of the protection of independent bodies like the Auditor General's Office and allied institutions that are scattered in the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana. So in lieu of that, though, I sure should be having a former boss of the Ghana Integrity Initiative joining this conversation and certainly getting me some thoughts on that. But that will be after the break. Welcome back to UPfront, and we sure should be able to still work out a plan to the former Auditor General, but a man who's been in the space for a long time, who really had difficulties with this particular judgment right from the decision of the presidency, the directive, right from the beginning. It's also an anti-corruption campaigner. So let's pick up some thoughts of Mr. Vitus Azim, a former executive director of the GII, and a man you know for the last almost 4 decades has spent quality time fighting and promoting the issues to do with fighting corruption in the Republic of Ghana. Mr. Azim, you're welcome to UPfront.
Thank you.
I hope we are doing well this evening. Now, I'm zooming into what's really the case to do with the vindication of Daniel Zhao Domelevo. You are a man of higher thought when it comes to the fight against corruption. How did you receive this news? And do you think it's an advancement of the space to do with protection of independent institutions of state?
Well, yes, I think it was a welcome decision, and I heard it with happiness, because some of us felt that what the president and the government did was not right, because especially as the fact that there were some cases going on that the Auditor General, that then Auditor General was handling. So if with the way they removed him or asked him to proceed on leave, and then later on retirement, some of us felt that it was a way of protecting the people that he had targeted for as a way of either prosecution or to. In fact, there was already a case that was going to be prosecuted, and so this ruling is a good ruling. But let me say that this ruling has taken, is it 3 or 4 years to come? Let's say 3 years. Yeah. That is not good enough. Our Supreme Court, our Judiciary needs to take a look at the pace at which some of these decisions are taken. For me, as a layman, I think that this decision could have been taken within 2 or 3 months, because they are just interpreting the law. It did not require so much time. And you see, I've gone to the court complex, and they have displayed that justice delayed is justice denied. This is what they are advertising in their own buildings. So if they themselves are involved in delaying justice, then it's more or less just denied, because Mr. Domelevo could have reinstated almost immediately the time that this thing happened. But he has been out, he has had to move on. So it's not fair to Mr. Domelevo, and it's not fair to the fight against corruption.
The position he personally takes is that, well, the people who made the ruling, they have a proper appreciation of what justice delayed, being justice denied actually means, and he thinks they were mindful of that. So he's not very, very worried about that particular point. I need to ask you, though, he's heavily convinced this is not only vindication, but this is good for the protection of bodies like the Auditor General's office, so that people cannot willy-nilly remove or, at their whims, control such institutions. Do you have a similar view?
Yes, I think it's a restatement of the independence of these independent institutions. That the executive cannot get up one night and think that, oh, this guy, with the way he's behaving, we're not happy with it, and then just ask him to go or proceed on leave or go on retirement. So I think as for that, the ruling wants to restate the point clearly to the president and his ministers that they don't have powers that they are assuming. They must go by the constitution that is guiding all of us in this country. So that one, yes, I think that's the point. But it's also an indictment on the president's so-called fight against corruption. Because clearly, he is a lawyer, he has lawyers that advise him, and you didn't expect him to take a decision that will be ruled against by the Supreme Court.
Now, on the point that you just raised about this being a blot on the president's record or legacy, or if he wants to do, reference has been made to the oath of the Executive President of the Republic. The part which says that he will at all times preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana. and that he dedicates himself to the service and well-being of the people of this republic and to do right by all manner of persons.
Please, it's not clear, too clear. Can you, I'm at a noisy place. Can you raise your voice?
I was asking whether you, in your opinion, the very decision to ask the man to proceed on leave, which has been taken down by the Supreme Court, is somewhat not in consonance with the part of the president's oath of office where he's supposed to do right by all manner of persons.
Yes, that is it. And he himself swore at his inauguration in 2017, 2017, that he was going to be a president of all, he would uphold the rule of law, and he would protect the public purse. So if you have somebody who is helping you to protect the public purse, and you treat him this way, shabbily, definitely it means that you are not putting the national interest ahead of either yours or other people's personal interest. And that is not good enough.
The question, though, has been what happens next. The Supreme Court just have a view on this matter. Can we demand that the office of the president apologize? Can we demand that they make a commitment never to do anything similar to this particular act? What can we as a people do to ensure this is not repeated?
Whether we make that demand or not, if the president is determined to act dictatorially, he will still go ahead. But we need to demand that the other institutions, that the judiciary stands firm on principles and the integrity of the individual that constitute that judiciary. That parliament wakes up to its oversight role over the executive. Because as for the politician and the executive, there may not be any motivation for them to do what we want. But then that's why there are checks and balances. You have three arms of government that are supposed to be checking each other. So yes, we can demand that the president does that, but he may still ignore it. But then we also have to insist that the other arms of government carry out their mandate efficiently and successfully in the national interest.
Mr. Azim, the understanding that some have taken to this point is that even in the fight against corruption and the related points, we should reform our institutions to the point that they are protective of their independence, to the point that they fight back when there's an attempt to encroach on their independence. Is this something that ought to be learned by other institutions?
You see, that is a very difficult situation because the president is the appointing authority. And when he asked the Domelevo to move on to go on retirement, leave, yeah. He already immediately appointed somebody else within the same organization to take over. Mm-hmm. And so, how can he as an individual fight back? It's difficult for himself to fight back as an individual. But the institution would have been the right person, the right body to fight back. But because they all owe their allegiance, indirectly or directly to the president, it was difficult for them to fight back. And that's why we at the outside, the civil society and the media, should fight back. The other two arms of government should fight back. So that's how I see it. Because it's affecting you yourself, it's difficult for you to fight back, especially if they've already broken your rank by giving appointments to people who were lower than you.
There's also a question about what this means for the larger Ghanaian society. And some have already started indicating that this is a good beginning for us to rethink how we engage in public office, the conduct of public officers, that they should be mindful of how courts will take views like this of their conduct. Can we, for example, have a system where the leadership of the country will be careful in making similar decisions going into the future?
That is the ideal situation. And that's what we all desire as a country, or as citizens of this country. But as I said, there is no motivation for people in this country to do the right thing. In the advanced countries, even though there is no motivation for them to do the right thing, the other arms of government, the checks and balances work. So if you do the wrong thing, there are people that will call you to order. Unfortunately, in our system, it's not like that. And let me mention that today the Supreme Court has made 2 rulings that are landmark rulings in the change of the hierarchy of the Supreme Court. I don't want to read meanings into it, but it is important, and I hope that it's a meaning that the judiciary is going to change for the better, because the past experience has not been that very encouraging to some of us.
I'm not sure what you mean by that. The understanding we all have is that the courts mostly will look at the facts and come to a determination. That's how they rule, right?
Well, that is how it should be. But sometimes some of us may have the perception that, especially we the lay people, sometimes we may not be satisfied with the decisions.
Okay.
And we may tend to link it to the individuals involved in the decisions.
Because there are some who are already stating that those who have questions about the independence of the judiciary and the apex court's very independence, those who are tagged it as a unanimous FC and all of them, they've been proven wrong.
Well, that's why I just raised this issue about the fact that there's a change in the hierarchy of the judiciary. And that is very important. Shortly after that change, there's also a change in the perception, not necessarily the reality, but the perception as a result of these 2 rulings.
Now, one other point, though, in order to be seen as treading this same path of asserting its independence and proving to the people of this republic that justice is seen to be done and manifestly seen to be done, what are your expectations of the apex court going into the future?
My expectations of the apex court, like I said, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a layman, but my expectations are that they will interpret the law in a way that the law requires them to do, and then in a way that will be understood by many Ghanaians as being fair and just. Of course, the law is a technical field, and sometimes we may not understand or agree with some of the decisions of the court, the judiciary. But there are certain things that sometimes it's almost clear that it didn't go in the right direction, at least to we the ordinary people, and that's our concern. So we expect that the situation will change.
Will this affect how you, for example, see the then acting, now substantive Auditor General? Will the ruling that his appointment in of itself was problematic, it was unconstitutional in the first place, will the ruling affect how you see him in his office and his role as he occupies him today?
Well, what affected my perception of him was when he was asked to act. Just the following day, he cleared the senior minister. And that was worrying. That made most of us to conclude that the removal of Mr. Domelevo was to pave the way for the senior minister to be cleared. And although after that, some of the reports that he has released tend to try to make us change our perception about him, except with particular grasp to that particular issue.
Now, there is also a school of thought that says, since he has not, and some of the seminal work of Daniel Domelevo was the surcharging and also the disallowance period, something that's hardly happening under the new Auditor General. Is that worrying to you?
Definitely it's worrying, because when your predecessor starts something in the right direction, something that is hailed by many of the citizens of this country, we expect that when you take over, you follow the same. So if you are unable to follow the same, or if you refuse to follow the same, it is obviously worrying to to well-meaning Ghanaians.
Now,
of course,
yes,
we
please,
probably would understand that he was appointed to act.
Okay.
And so, as a human being, he will be worried about, he will be eager to be confirmed. And so he would probably feel constrained to act in a way that may not please the appointing authorities. But that is not a good excuse for him not to do what the law says he should do.
I get your point. Now, I need to ask you this question because we have been at this pole of pushing the frontiers of our democratic governance for some time now. After more than 3 decades, do you think today is a very important epoch in our quest to advance governance in this country?
I will say so, but with a caveat that this is just a one-off thing, and it will be too early for us to draw that conclusion. Although it's a welcome decision, and that it could lead to that, but we need to see subsequent rulings on similar cases, especially involving the executive.
Okay. Because the other question I had in mind is, frankly, because you have been in this space for a very long time, do you think we are really advancing Ghana's democracy and the fight against corruption? Are we taking good steps in the right direction?
No, I think we are not succeeding in the fight against corruption and pushing good governance in the country. You see, some of us believe that the economic crisis that we are having is partly due to the way we run this country, the corruption that has engulfed us as a nation. And so I cannot say that we are moving in the right direction. Things are not the best. And you see, one of the things that you should look at, when a minister is not performing, if people are not satisfied with the performance of a minister, and they openly declare their unhappiness, you expect the president to do something about it if we are really progressing in our fight against corruption and trying to ensure good governance. But that is not what we're seeing.
Now, that's the point. Maybe as a way of wrapping up this conversation with you, sir, what do you hope to see from now until the foreseeable future? Specifically, the milestones that will convince you that we are back on track.
It is not one arm of government that will act in a way that will make us see that we are back on track. But if you are talking about the judiciary, we just hope that, especially with the change in the hierarchy, decisions, rulings in the courts will go in a way that will go according to the law, that movements and assignments of cases and empaneling of judges will be very fairly done. In fact, there's supposed to be a computerized system of empaneling judges.
There was.
Yes, let's hope that they go by that. So that it also helps to establish trust of citizens in the judiciary. I have questioned the basis of certain judges, Supreme Court judges, always sitting on virtually every case in the past 2 years. That is a cause of worry to me. I'm a layman, I don't know why, I don't know the basis, but that is a worry. And so when you do things like that and then the decision comes out in a certain way, you are tempted to conclude that maybe there is some reason for that, which may not be in the national interest.
There are other questions about whether Mr. Domelevo should be compensated. He feels that the taxpayers' money should not be used to compensate him, but do you think he deserves some compensation?
Mr. Domelevo is owed his salary and other entitlements up to the time that he was supposed to go on retirement. And so, based on the Supreme Court ruling, I think that should be given to him. If somebody should be charged for the cost involved, then it should be a different person and not Mr. Domelevo. It's the one that wrongly asked him to leave the audit service.
Sorry, I'm not sure. Sorry, I think I missed your very last point there, sir.
I am saying that Mr. Domelevo should be entitled to his salary and other things up to the time that he went on it. So he was supposed to go on retirement. If someone else is supposed to be charged for the cost of those entitlements to Mr. Domelevo, it should be the one who wrongly asked him to proceed on leave and subsequently on retirement and not Mr. Domelevo. He should not be penalized for the wrong of the president.
I get your point. I was saying that this was my last question, but I'm mindful to ask you what's happening with the Electoral Commission. You remember the recent appointments to join the commission and the concerns that have been raised about it. Mindful of your very sharp focus on what is appropriate and what is inappropriate, do you think that civil society's call for the two added on to be removed or asked to resign or leave office is a step in the right direction too?
Definitely, yes. You see, in this country, look, if you are known, there are certain institutions that you don't have to be a known party person. So there are two things. The integrity of the executive, the appointed authority, should have even guided those appointments. And then you, the people who are appointed, should also, if you have integrity, to say that, look, if I accept this position, I am going to have conflict of interest. I will not be able to perform very well. Maybe, sir, put me at a place where I will not be involved in determining elections or how elections are done. So it's not even an issue at all that either the president withdraws the appointments or they themselves resign. I think those are the two issues.
And, well, I guess I have to leave it here. And my thanks, many thanks to you again for helping us appreciate some of the issues surrounding the matter of the Supreme Court of the Republic of Ghana backing the position of civil society and ruling as unconstitutional the decision to order Mr. Daniel Domelevo to proceed on leave. Vitus Azim, I'm grateful to you this evening. And